Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. You guys may remember 3 years ago when I spent some time living in Wallace, Idaho. Now, Wallace has a very different attitude. You would never think there was a pandemic going on back then. Even just a few weeks into the pandemic, it seemed like, the world went crazy for a few weeks. We're not part of that. And so that was nice. And I got to mingle with a lot of people. Wallace is also very accepting of people who are single for life, basically, right? And they're a mining town. They obviously attract a lot of single men. Uh, and so they're very accepting of that. I was working remotely at the time, and what's really interesting is that they're a mining town. They mine silver right now, but a few decades from now, they may find that silver is actually the byproduct. Now they need to mine strategic metals, right? Uh, so I lived there for 4 months. Now, one day I had gone to Craigslist to look for a board game that I wanted to program so that I could make a video of how the computer thinks and all of that. The game was Patchwork. And I'd gone to this guy's home in Kellogg. It's about a 15-mile drive away. Gone to the guy's home in Kellogg, and I was just about to give him cash. And he says, "Oh no, I don't take dirty cash. I've used my Square thing." And what's really funny is this is, I want to say, November of 2020. He sent me how dirty this cash is. He doesn't even have a mask on. I mean, this is Idaho we're talking about. And so I thought it was a scam. Maybe I'm going to put my credit card in there. He's going to steal the number and go on a shopping spree. That was my first reaction to that. But it looked legitimate. And I put my card in there, and it asked me if I want a tip. And that's what he was shooting for. And I think it was a $6 item. I put in a 1 cent tip because I was annoyed enough by that. Now, one other time I had gone to, I think this was in downtown Seattle where I ran into this. In Seattle, we had a lot of panhandlers. And as I'm driving past one of the panhandlers, he's holding up a sign, and there's a lot of grammar and spelling problems with the sign. I could hardly understand what he was saying. And so I pulled up a little bit closer to figure out what it was. I'm just insanely curious sometimes. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. And it took me like 10 seconds to figure out just what the message was. And now I'm looking at it. And I didn't give him anything. I didn't have any money on him, but he got really upset. He chased my car. He felt that because I had spent so much time looking at his sign, that he felt entitled to something. And that's the kind of attitude that I have a problem with. It's not the tipping that I have a problem with. The other problem I have with tipping or any sort of expectation of some kind of a donation is when people expect it to be a certain percentage, right? So during the pandemic, there were a couple of times when I ordered on Instacart or some other online service. And so I would be expected to tip a certain percentage. But then it dawned on me, the stuff I'm buying tends to be a little bit more dense in terms of the value, right? So a bag of blue corn chips might weigh the same as a bag of, junk food chips, but it take as much effort to deliver. But now I'm expected to tip more because I'm expected to tip a percent of whatever that stuff is. It doesn't make any sense at all, right? Why is it maybe if you tip by how many bags are being carried, that might be a little bit more sensible, right? I guess it would be harder for the algorithm to figure out, right? But a lot of so I would get a lot of bad service because they would see a $300 order with only a $10 tip. What they don't realize is that it might only be 2 or 3 bags, right? Or similarly at a restaurant, right? We're expected to tip a certain percentage. I tend not to have this problem at restaurants because I only go to the ones that I won't have a problem with. Where I do run into this problem is that I like to vary my tips based on the service. I don't just give 15 to 20%. Depending on the service, I could give anywhere from 0 to 1,000%, and I think that encourages good service, right? So sometimes the waiter goes above and beyond to make sure I'll have a safe experience. Or if I'm traveling and they give me a lot of good advice on the area, I don't have a problem with giving a good tip, right? I kind of like it when I travel to a low income country. Like I was just in Mexico not long ago, and I can give a really good tip, right? For them, it's a really good tip, right? For me, it's like pocket money, right? Or better yet, when I go to Poland or even to a lesser extent, Taiwan, I can really, really reward good service there, right? Um, but the problem I have with tips is that the expectation of tips creates a very toxic culture, in my opinion, right? So right now, as I speak, we're having our third year of transitory stagflation, and a lot of restaurants are compensating by having these service charges. And so what looks like $10 on the menu now becomes $20. And I would imagine very little of it goes to their staff. And when people get the shock of the bill, they're probably not in a good mood to tip, right? I go out to a restaurant, I see something I expect to be $10. I might be thinking of leaving a $2 tip. I get the check and it's $20. That the tip just kind of evaporated. I suspect that's what's going to happen, right? I had a funny experience when I was living in New York. I had a favorite Japanese restaurant, but when I asked the waiter about some ingredients in one of the dishes, he pretended to not understand what I was asking. He kept repeating the question, but completely differently, and he didn't want to answer it, which is what the problem was. So I ordered something else, and which I knew would be safe, and I think the meal came up to 38.60 something, and I gave him $40, and I ran for the door, and he ran after me, saying, excuse me," and he exaggerated the language barrier even more than it was. I later learned part of the problem with asking restaurants about food allergies and ingredients is that they don't want to make a mistake, right? If they don't know, that's on you, right? If they tell you that this stuff doesn't have milk or wheat or whatever, and they're wrong about it, they could be liable, right? So a lot of restaurants just want to play dumb when they get a question like that. It's probably cheaper to deal with the fallout of a dissatisfied customer than $1 million lawsuit, right? And so I've learned, depending on the restaurant, sometimes it's better to say that I have a religious objection, right? Because nobody's going to die from a religious issue, and they might be more willing to divulge information that way. I've learned that, but gave me a bad taste that he chased me out the door. The restaurant was kind of on my way back from work, so I would peek in there, and if he was in there, I would just turn away. It gave me that bad of a taste. Eventually, I found out the day of the week that he doesn't work, and I went there, and I became a regular there. There was a college girl, I want to say, in her senior year of college, and we got to know each other. And I was bragging to her about my investments. At the time, gold was overpriced, right? This is 2013 we're talking about. But a lot of the rare gold coins were going for just above spot price. And I thought that was a very safe investment. I was buying double eagles and some of the smaller pre-1933 gold coins. Some of them, if they were beat up or in bad condition, you could buy them for below spot price, if I remember correctly. So I was buying a lot of that stuff. My last time eating there before I moved out of New York, I gave her a 1/10 ounce of gold coin. So I'm not shy about tipping when the service warrants it. I wish it wasn't a fixed 10 or 15 or whatever percent it is, though, especially on Instacart, right? Or especially at a restaurant where the price could vary a lot. Imagine you order a very expensive bottle of wine for a very special occasion. It doesn't cost more to serve that than to serve a soda, right? I don't understand why the tips are proportional to what you order, right? So it's similar, especially on Instacart, right, where the price of the price density, if you will, of stuff can vary wildly from one item to the next, depending on the person's taste and dietary needs. Right? Doesn't make any sense to me. All right, I thought I would throw this out there. I think the service charges are really going to backfire, though. People are going to tip less to compensate for it. Basically, the restaurant is stealing from their staff. Right? They don't see it that way, obviously. This is the Peter Dislike Show. Bum, 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum, 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 bum. I'm going to do that again. Bum, 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum, bum.